Welcome to Between Product and Partnerships, a podcast focused on bringing together product, partnership, and engineering leaders to discuss how to build, support, and scale SaaS ecosystems. Presented by the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance and sponsored by Pandium, an integration platform and marketplace for ecosystems.
I'm Kelly Serban. I'm the Director of Marketing at Pandium, and I'm the co-founder of the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance. Today we have a great guest. We're going to dive in, talk about tech partnerships and tech partnership programs. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Francois. Thank you for having me, Kelly. I used to run the partnerships team at Sendoso. I recently refocused my responsibilities on building out the platform and integrations ecosystem at Sendoso. So I joined the product team as of a week ago. Before that, I grew the platform and partnerships ecosystem at Typeform. Before that, I was more into go-to-market partnerships, but my favorite part of partnership definitely is the product side.
Yeah, I think at Typeform, doesn't tech partnerships report to product as well?
I think as of today, they don't anymore. When I joined back in 2018, we reported into the chief platform officer that eventually became CTO. And then a couple of months after I joined, we got a change in leadership and we hired a COO who wanted to own partnerships because he really saw that mostly as a go-to-market and customer acquisition play, even though we were building this whole thing mostly for improving the customer experience on the product. So it was more of a product play. When he realized that a few months after joining, we moved back into the product organization. I think from what I heard, they may be back into the business operation side of things, but I'm not too sure about that. So don't
quote you on it. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, though, because I think especially sort of mid-market companies who are growing really struggle with the reporting structure. Having been through this at different companies, do you have any thoughts on, how to frame the decision? Because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer as to where should tech partnerships be reporting in an organization, but sort of what's your advice on companies who are struggling through exactly that? Should we move this to product? Should it be under the CRO? Should we have a platform team that's independent of these others? It's going right into the CEO.
It's a good question, really. I think I'm going to give you the Normandy answer, as we say in French, like not really either side of the spectrum or in between, or pick your own answer kind of thing. But I really believe it depends on the context of your organization. And what I mean by that, if I take the example of Typeform, for instance, we didn't have an acquisition problem. We had a retention problem. And so integrations were seen as the biggest lever to tackle that churn problem. And because we didn't have an acquisition problem, it was not really top of mind, at least in the early days. So being part of the product organization made our life a little easier because we removed the pipeline and co-selling distractions from our work. We were here to build a retention engine, and we were able to focus on just doing that. And that also means being also free to explore potential integrations and or partnerships. Those are not necessarily always tied with each other, but some good partnerships may not really have an integration play and vice versa. But at least we were not chasing or making decisions on integrations to build based on the acquisition potential, the level of engagement from sales execs on the other side of the aisle. Really, we're able to focus on what really adds value for our customers, what really makes their lives as a user of Typeform better. Surprisingly enough, we build those integrations and some of them turned out to be fantastic growth channels as well. But it was a byproduct of the work we were trying to do. So the focus really was on the user experience. Happened to have some of them turning out to be really cool channels. If you've ever had HubSpot or Zapier blog about you, you'd know that you get a ton of traffic from those because they're really good at SEO and driving traffic to their partners. At Sendoso, the play was slightly different. Also, more of a cultural approach to partnerships as well, because we were founded by salespeople or people with a sales background. The main tag on partnerships was go-to-market motion, so co-selling, co-marketing, building out the ecosystem. We are moving partnerships as a whole into more of a central go-to-market function in the company. So partnerships, marketing, and all the sales functions and customer experience functions will actually report into one person, which I think is going to be a better position for partnerships to have an impact on the organization. We have been for the last 6 months part of the marketing organization, which in my opinion is the worst place to be, because you become obsessed with pipeline numbers because your CMO is obsessed with pipeline numbers, and that's the main conversations that the rest of the marketing team outside of maybe product marketing and brand might have. And so if you ask for resources to do anything else, it's really hard a conversation to have. Being more central means you can really focus on building out a partnership function. And for that matter, technology and agencies probably have more in common than we give them credit for. Like, agencies should absolutely have an impact on retention, because a customer using an agency should get a better experience around the product, should be the expertise faster, should activate more, get more value, and etc. So it's no different from technology partners, but I think essentially being able to have a more central function gives us more buy-in internally. Customer support will naturally be inclined to work with partnerships. Customer onboarding, same thing. Education, same thing. Marketing and sales, same thing. It's not just like pipeline, and then we have to forget a little bit about supporting our sales team. The only exception being me at Sendoso. I'm really inside the product org now, and I'm there for one good reason. We have excellent coverage. We have really smart people that will focus on the go-to-market side of things. And so my role is really going to be about growing the ecosystem and making Sendoso as valuable as possible for our customers. So I'm back to this customer first mindset now.
Yeah, and how do you sort of envision that collaboration playing out in terms of, so you're in the product org now, are you going to be so are the tech partners are going to be interacting with you and with this other side on the more go-to-market activities, but collaborating with you on sort of the product integrations and product roadmaps staying aligned?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think there's one thing that we definitely need to work on at Sendoso, which is being better as a product organization when it comes to figuring out what problems we could solve for customers that we are not solving yet. So a large chunk of the product organization, as with every organization, is focused on undeniably prioritized issues like smoother user experience, less bugs, and higher reliability and things like that, that are not necessarily acquisition driven, for that matter. That those are problems that you would experience with any product once you're already a customer. But we also need to be more mindful about how we can better serve our ICP, how we can build a product that feels more enticing. A good example of that, and that's besides retention for that matter, like as much as building integrations correlate and getting integrations adopted correlates with retention, there's also an acquisition mindset to be had there, but it's also around building the product so that it caters better to needs from customers that you cannot really please today with your narrative. If you're very biased towards a set of platforms that you integrate well with, but they're competitors of those platforms you don't, for instance, then you will isolate yourself from that potential market share as well of customers using such CRM or such marketing automation platform and so on. So we need to be a little bit more mindful about that. And integrations are very different from other features in that they tend to disqualify you way sooner than features that you will find you should have had to close a deal later on in the sales cycle. You will find that you're not doing like certain reporting things and whatnot in stage 3 once you're like really mature with your demo cycles and everything. But if you don't have integrations with like the platform that customer has, the customer is going to say, sorry, it's not going to be a fit, and you kill that opportunity at stage one. So the role of integration is very different from any other feature in that respect. It's way more dimensioning for how the pipeline will be able to move along.
Yeah, and one thing, I've observed in the last few years is, in general, customers seem to be becoming a little bit more savvy in terms of realizing that any integration is not the same as any other integration. So I think maybe 3 to 5 years ago, a lot of companies would just say, oh, okay, you're integrated to Salesforce. Great. Check the box, sign the deal. And then maybe 6 months later, they might find out it doesn't quite meet their needs. And I do hear people, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but, asking ahead of time, like actually scoping it out in a more detailed way to say, is this actually going to meet my needs, especially when you get to those more complex integrations? Is that aligned with what you're seeing, or do you feel like customers still are just kind of looking to ensure that the box is checked and that you have a connection?
No, it's you're spot on there. It actually almost can be brought down to two orthogonal problems that you're trying to solve. One of them is you need deep integrations to actually provide that extreme value around the product by providing a very tight integration that does everything that that customer needs. And that's the retention play side of things. There's an undeniable fact in marketing SaaS right now. I think Scott Brinker on the marketing Martech Chief Martech blog posted a couple of years ago where there was a study saying that the level of integration was the main deciding factor for buying a SaaS marketing tech stack application. And that's really, it has almost nothing to do with how good the integrations are. It has to do with, I'm confident going with that platform because they have all the logos I need to see on their integrations page. Whatever usefulness you'll get out of those integrations is almost irrelevant at that point. It becomes a churn problem once they join because of that, and turns out the integration kind of sucks. So it's our job to make it as balanced as possible between deep, very vertical integrations and horizontal breadth of integration to advertise the product and make it more appealing to a buyer. It's not an easy task. You need to really understand your ICP there. You need to know which ones you can just fluff out to make it part of the conversation, but you know that it's going to be kind of a peripheral integration. You need to really understand which ones are going to be at the center of your product's experience.
Do you have any advice on like gathering that information? I think, there's some tools out there now that, marketing departments have in terms of like the customer tech stack, right? So like you can look in Clearbit and, they will show you a certain number of technology that even your prospects are using. So, I think that's one way to start gathering the information and profiles. And then obviously talking to customers and partners. But do you have any other sort of like tricks or advice for really, and I think this goes to prioritizing integrations, right? Really sussing out that like framework of which ones do we really need to maybe own ourselves and build in-house, or which ones do we, want to put our more limited product resources behind?
I would categorize three different things here. You mentioned Clearbit, so the tech tags are useful. Similarly, like Datanyze and ZoomInfo, which are the same company now, can provide some level of insight with this. If you really have nothing to deal with, you can always do like a builtwith.com search on, see if there are like HubSpot trackers to assess that customer is using HubSpot, for instance, out of their website. It's either of those options are decent level of information, but really not that reliable down the road. Whereas platform like Crossbeam are the second category that are basically a source of truth, an almost absolute source of truth. And I'll qualify the almost in a second, but if you see that prospect A is also a customer of Zendesk and Salesforce and Marketo, then you've got a good sense of what their tech stack looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean, and that's the almost part, that the buyer that you're talking to is an active user or has an interest at all in integrating with this, but at least it gives you conversation prompts that you can start using to qualify and better understand whether you need to talk to that particular buyer about one of the integrations that you support that you might think they care about. And they may not, but at least you're having this conversation. There's another reason to warrant a little bit of caution, but it really doesn't happen that much with those platforms, is when you're looking at potential partners or existing partners of yours that have a strong self-serve model, you will see sometimes that they have customers that really look more like they should be their direct competitor. And so that they're not using it. So HubSpot could come up with like Klaviyo and Sendinblue being customers of HubSpot. And you're like, that sounds like they're more trying to scalp competition rather than actually actively using that. So you need to be able to identify those, but those are very easy to spot as well. And the third part is really like the grindy option, which is run a good old technographic survey with both your customers and your prospective market to understand what they are using for different things. Some products do it really well at the onboarding stage. I used to share and beg all of my product colleagues at Typeform to go through the ClickUp onboarding experience. I don't know if you've ever done that, but they are actually really good at asking you through onboarding, which is a very self-serve experience. What you use for CRM, what do you use for internal communications, what do you use for this and that? And actually prompt you throughout the first couple of weeks of your customer experience to integrate with that. If you said, I use Teams, then it will like, you need to integrate with Teams now. If you said HubSpot, and then you will have a reminder to integrate with HubSpot. So those not only are a good source of information, they also are good reminders that you should activate the integration and therefore become a better customer for them and get more value out of the platform as a user, which is the same thing really. Down the road, you become a better customer because you get more value out of it. ActiveCampaign used to have those questions as well, like what are you migrating to ActiveCampaign from in their onboarding journey? I don't know if they still have that. So you can have hacks around the product to collect the information without making it overwhelming. Like a technographic survey can be a little intimidating. So you need to have a budget to incentivize responses and so on. Whereas throughout onboarding, you can be very targeted. You are interested in CRM scope, so you just ask a couple of questions about CRM and be done with it, and not become too intrusive in that to maximize response rate. There are ways of doing this. I recommend a blend of all three really to make it as accurate as possible. The other benefit of technographic survey is you can follow up on that. You can ask qualifying questions like, you're using Salesforce. How do you expect to use Sendoso and Salesforce together? Like what the experience should be. What do you need to do with Salesforce that we may be able to help, that we may not be supporting today? So you can also start looking at roadmap and new user stories and making the integration better as a result. It gives you contacts as well to people that you've basically paid to answer your survey. So you are entitled to actually reach out to them and follow up and run an interview program with them to better understand what you need to be building to make the integrations more useful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's, and the way that you can use that information to then down the line sort of segment people to get them to try to activate it. I think that's such a huge important point, because if people are bombarded with like 100, 200 integrations, they might just like not pay attention. But if you're like, I know coming in that you're using Salesforce, so we're going to reach out to you about this integration specifically, like you're going to get a higher activation rate. How important do you think it is that sort of the questions of integrations get in on customer satisfaction surveys as a way, both for this kind of actionable information, but also as a way for the tech partnerships team to show that there's an impact here, it's making a difference?
Vital. CSAT for integrations, I think, has been part of my playbook anyway since Typeform in the early days. We had our leadership questioning the quality of integrations, and we were looking at tickets. And if you experience a bug with an integration, you'll open a ticket. The support team will know about it. Some customers can be very loud and very vocal about their level of happiness or unhappiness about an integration. So you will tend to see that as a stronger signal than it really is, because it could be a very low value customer, for instance, or a customer that is asking for something or complaining about something you shouldn't be doing. So you need to respect also your company's strategic alignment there. But nothing beats asking them how they feel about it and make that as many data points as possible. So at Typeform, we launched a CSAT integration that was popping up to customers that had been using an integration for more than a month. And we were asking that again 6 months later, because sentiment will evolve. Even if the integration hasn't, like you might find it barely useful at first, but then realize that 6 months down the road, it actually helped you, or the other way around. So you need to understand about this. The other way this is useful is it is helping you make sense of external noise as well. You might have a couple of bad reviews on the Salesforce App Exchange or on the HubSpot marketplace that will make a bad impression with your execs, but they are just ratings, 1 out of 5 stars. And if you look at the comments, they may actually be pretty irrelevant. Like they may be judging your platform, not the integration. So asking straight up questions about the experience around the integration to your customers directly and regularly helps you keep your finger on the pulse of the experience with each and every individual integration. And so we rolled that out at Sendoso as well a few months ago, just to make sure that I was joining the product team with at least some data to start working with. And yeah, we're already learning a ton from that. And we had never really done that before. Our preferred way of collecting data at Sendoso for the longest time has been account managers and CSMs actually talking to customers a lot. And that's really hard to reconcile, because customers will talk about a bunch of issues and a bunch of things that they like and dislike. And so it's really hard to make sense of it from an analytical perspective. Having the CSAT survey removes that conversation from the QBR's equation and also helps you organize that a little better. So it's a good way of doing it, in my opinion. I cannot advocate more for CSAT surveys for individual integrations. It's a really good hack.
Yeah. So what about the quantitative side of this? So I think that qualitative side is so important, because when we're doing these trackings, that the best case is we're getting these amazing correlations, right? The person who's using 5 integrations, they're retained 500% more, but you can get pushback like, well, yeah, but that person was just always going to be a super user of the product. So I think that's where the qualitative data sort of helps to back it up. But in terms of the quantitative side, is this something you think mid-market SaaS companies struggle with, to actually sort of get partnerships team be able to access that data in terms of, these are the customers using these integrations, these how much they're using it, they're churning? Or do you think that's pretty much a straightforward process? You just need your product team to set it up, essentially, and your engineering team?
Good question. Again, very different experiences at Sendoso and at Typeform on this. I think at Typeform, people were a little more prone to churn because of an integration. At Sendoso, we don't see that at all. Like we might see an integration having more tickets, more bugs being reported than others, but they don't necessarily link to churn, because they are still too much of a peripheral part of the product. And it's a luxury for us to be able to address those issues before we actually make them more of a central part of the product, outside of certain integrations that are really deep into the product. At Typeform, because we were a self-serve product, it was easier to churn as well. A lot of our customers were month to month, may still be, for that matter. I'm just not there anymore, so I don't have data to back it up. Assume that my statements about Typeform stopped a year ago. So it was easier for people to churn, and in the churn survey, just complain about lack of functionality for some integration and so on, which also happens to be excellent feedback, both quantitatively and qualitatively, for that matter. but I don't think we can get away with not deep diving into the qualitative side of things, especially with unhappy customers. It's probably actually a good way of filtering out the power users and champions of your product, because the ones that are pissed very unlikely are one of your champions, and they are the best source of information for you to improve your product and your integrations as a product for that matter.
And what do you think about sort of, mid-market companies who have their own in-app marketplaces adding reviews in? Because I think, you're alluding to reviews in general are a self-selecting group. And, a mid-market company may not have the volume that, say, Salesforce or HubSpot has, but is that valuable to other customers? And is that valuable to the SaaS company as another source of information?
This is an ambiguous topic, because if you're on top of your G2 play, you should have good reviews. And this is more a marketing performance issue than it really is a product performance issue.
Reviews of the integrations, though.
Yeah, but reviews about the integrations, we've never had that at Typeform. We don't have that at Sendoso. What I'm seeing a lot, though, is app directories integrating with G2 reviews and Trustpilot reviews and so on, which end up being about your product, not the integration. So
yes, which is interesting, right? Because you can have a great product that people love, and you could have a crappy integration. So it is somewhat misleading. But you're right. I've seen that as well.
Exactly. The place where I've seen, to your point, the most potentially, but not always, the most relevant feedback about the integration would be the HubSpot marketplace and the Salesforce App Exchange, because that's where people tend to be a little bit more vocal about the integration, because they are understanding the purpose of the marketplace itself, versus pulling reviews about your product from G2. And even then, we'd still get reviews about your product being a great product or a bad product, and that review would have nothing to do with the integration with the marketplace that you're listing out of. So you cannot treat that as purely quantitative data. You need to get into the content of the reviews to really get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as a more product-focused partnerships person, do you have advice for partnerships people who are stuck in organizations where they really are strapped for product and engineering resources, and they have to sort of use the force of their personality, persuasion to get more resources that they need to meet their objectives, but the product team is not being told from on high, like, you need to give these resources? Is there a way for partnership people to talk to product people and sort of under maybe terms or value propositions that are going to make a partnership person more successful in sort of advocating for resources and for buy-in and for assistance on what they're trying to do with the integrations?
The partnership people, are always a little salesy. A lot of us actually have a sales background. So we need to use that to our advantage, but while being smooth as well, not too pushy. I think the conversation needs to start upstairs at the exec level to reveal the impact of integrations on SaaS products, because even if your company doesn't really know what the play is for them, it's true for a lot of organizations. Actually, I've never talked to a SaaS company, and I talk to SaaS companies. It's basically my job, right? All the time. I've never talked to one that has done the homework and didn't find correlation between integrations and retention. Never. And we all have different flavors of it. I remember talking to some of our partners that were obsessed with driving adoption of integration as early as the first month of the customer journey. And for that reason, they actually only cared about that timeframe. I've talked to companies that were measuring that through impact on LTV, through impact on retention, whatever component of LTV. My preference is looking at active usage, because I really truly believe that the power of integrations is not so much in making a statement to the market that you integrate, but actually make it useful for your customers. So I would advocate against measuring setup, but actually measuring usage. And if you can get a friend in the data team to back you up on this and run the analysis, then it's really easy because it should look good. It should look like you will have an impact if you focus on that. Take it upstairs to your chief product officer, your CTO. Usually CTOs are friendly to API ecosystem and conversations like this, but not necessarily have the resources to support that, but they will advocate for it. Chief product officers more and more come from companies that have had that strong ecosystem culture. And so they will understand that as well. It's mostly the business people that need to understand this. And you should not make it just a product conversation. You should advocate that it's going to be good for retention. So customer experience people will be interested in that because CSMs and account managers' lives and performance will be improved with strong integrations. It will make for good selling points as well. So the sales team should be interested in that. It makes for excellent co-marketing conversations. So the marketing team should be happy to have lower lift programs that they can run and amplify through the audience of a partner. It's really hard to find reasons not to do it, but it's also culturally too easy to say, let's do it and not actually implement anything like that. So you need to just set up metrics and make yourself the owner of those metrics and accountable for those metrics, saying to your execs, we're going to do this. I need help from CX, I need help from marketing, I need help from sales and product and engineering. And if we do this together and align on the metrics, then the product metrics will be my metrics. So we will naturally work together. And same thing with sales and marketing and so on. So alignment on metrics is probably the easiest way to drive performance around integrations ecosystems.
Yeah, that makes sense. How important do you think developer relations is in this? Because at what stage is it sort of when someone's trying to become a platform, even if they're not trying to become Salesforce, but say a platform in their space and have more people build onto them? Should companies be hiring a developer relations person? Because if you're not already a developer tool, which is a little different because they probably have that motion kind of already built out. But if your user is a marketer or, a people ops person, and you want other companies to start building onto you, those other developers, right, are going to have to start interacting and relying on your company. How important is it to start that function, and at what stage should that function be started, if it should be?
I think as soon as you have an API that you may have built for internal reasons, but started to expose, you should have DevRel people on board. And it doesn't necessarily mean having a full-time DevRel person, but at least have someone in the company with that mentality. Could be an engineer, could be a product owner, could be a sales engineer for that matter, but you need to be able to lean on someone to talk about the API. When I joined Sendoso, we had an API. We only had one partner building on it. And within a year of just saying, the API is there, let's talk about it more. And we didn't do a lot, really. We just started talking about it and we started tracking it. We launched 2 more in the last year. We have about 5 or 6 that are being built actively right now. And we are, because of that traction, building awareness internally about it. Like our engineering team that's rebuilding the product or improving the product knows about it and uses it to their own advantage as well. So it's a source of accelerated innovation internally. Our sales engineers are more comfortable talking about our API to customers that might want to use the API as well. I wish we had a developer relations person today. We don't, but we're hacking around it to provide that type of content, to build code samples and things like that, to list out building blocks that we need to add to the product to make the developer experience nicer and smoother as well. Better documentation, better code samples, better visibility. It might feel hard to justify that for certain business models. At Typeform, it was a no-brainer. We had between 50 and when I joined and 100,000 customers when I left. We had maybe 5,000 developer apps registered on the platform. So, and we had one DevRel person.
That's quite the load to manage.
Not to manage, but turned out to be a rock star. Actually having a small DevRel team might not be a nice thing for the DevRel person, but it's a good thing for the product because it forces you to obsess about the developer experience, make it as self-serve as possible. And that in turn attracts more people to actually think about using it, creating a developer app and using your API rather than having to talk to someone to set up your API keys and stand up a sandbox and things like that. So Typeform, in a sense, was a product that was naturally a good fit for that scaling without necessarily having a huge team. But that guy, Nicolas Grenier, I'm going to mention his name because it's almost the same name as mine with a typo. He is the rock star in that space. He knows every DevRel in the world. So he also accelerated the pipeline for integrations. He worked on so many other things than DevRel, like building proof of concepts for integration works that we wanted to build ourselves so we could pass it on to our product team. So we would bootstrap and bushwhack a third-party API to actually make our engineering's life easier when it came to us to actually build it and generate a ton of content around your API. At Sendoso, it might be a little early to have someone fully dedicated to that, but the mindset needs to be here and actually is here to build those code samples, talk to developers as much as possible, which is one of the things that I'm focusing on right now. Make an audit of our API. Turns out our API is great. We just need to talk to someone to use it. And it's lucky because the level of demand is not that much. So it gives me an excellent excuse to actually do my field research on what the developer experience is. So I don't feel like I need to make it too easy right away because I'm learning a lot from those interactions. But down the road, as we want to scale this, we will have to make it as self-serve as possible as well. So you just need to find the right time. Again, I think we're probably 6 months away from actually needing someone full-time to do this.
No, I think that's great advice that it can be a product person, it can be an engineer, it can be someone doing it part-time as long as you have some resource at least paying attention to it and the partnership person sort of using that to get more information about what will make it scalable and what's working and what's not. So last question, is there anything that you see sort of tech partnerships leaders either doing or believing that you think is a mistake or is being approached the wrong way in the field? Any advice that you would give if out there to your peers?
It's a hard question to answer because it really depends on, again, the context of your own organization, right? What I'm doing now covers the same business KPIs and goals that I had at Typeform, but the way of doing it is radically different. And the Typeform way wouldn't work here, and the Sendoso way wouldn't have worked at Typeform. So what really matters is understanding why you're doing this and making sure that there is alignment across the organization, because it's not a mountain that you can move by yourself. And it's true for partnerships in general. Like even people dealing with agencies, they have that issue. If their onboarding team, if their education team, if their customer success team does not embrace the agency mindset, then their job is really hard. And it's the same thing with technology partners. If your product team doesn't believe that integrations actually have a huge impact on retention, have a huge impact on acquisition, have a huge impact on understanding better your customers as well, based on what they're doing with integration, which is a third component of tech partnerships that's often overlooked. Look at what your customers are doing with the integrations and you'll learn more about what they actually do with the product. And it really is very obvious in many cases by just doing this, and not enough people do it. So convey those three messages, show data to back it up, and build alignment with your whole exec team is really, really important here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I love that idea of using it to better understand the customer's perspective on your own product. And I think tied to that, a lot of times people don't realize that higher integration usage leads to higher product usage. So because you're in there using the integration and it's maybe providing new functionality, you end up discovering something else in the product that's related to it, but is just in the product. And of course, product teams love to see that, right? They're like, oh, this is making customers actually use our product more, not just use the integration.
Absolutely. And I was making that point actually yesterday on the meeting internally, that when I was at Typeform, we saw one particular integration growing really fast at some point. And it was with a platform that was 100% focused on e-commerce. And we didn't really have e-commerce as one of our buyer persona or verticals that we were marketing to. But we actually discovered that it was a huge piece of our customer profile by just looking at them using that integration so much. Like, we're missing something here. Let's get on it. So yeah, it brings things to the table that you would never think of, or that you might think are secondary until they become too obvious. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's a new source of data on better understanding what your customers do with your product.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your expertise.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Is there anywhere where people can reach you? Just LinkedIn, Sendoso.com?
LinkedIn, partners at Sendoso.com, developers at Sendoso.com. But yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on the CSA Slack group. I'm on the product leader Slack group as well. I'm on your Slack group. So
so people can find you everywhere. Wherever they are, you are there.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the content, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. If you're someone who is working on building and scaling SaaS product partnerships, we invite you to apply to be a member of our community at SaaS Ecosystem Alliance.com.